Hi everyone, my name is Viviana Mejia. In this week's module and in the first two chapters of the book A Woman's Wage, Historical Meanings and Social Consequences by Kessler Harris, we learned about how women's wages were measured through their worth as they entered the workforce and what influenced their low wages. The first chapter discusses how women's wages were first determined by their worth and needs, which people assumed were not many since their husband or father were there to provide for them. The argument also stood that women's wants were simpler because their traditional pain intolerance and suffering trained them to have simpler needs. During the early 1900s, a man's wage was considered, keeping in mind his need to support himself, his children, and his wife. For women, her wage was seen as something extra that was not really needed considering she would have her father or husband to support her financially. The woman's wage around this time was seen as something that belonged to her family and was therefore not much higher than half the man's wage. Her wage was not intended to support her on her own, and it could not either. The living wage maintained men's privilege to care for women and children. Taking that away would hurt men's roles in society as well as their egos. The Atkins v. Children's Hospital Supreme Court case in 1923 brought up many arguments about the minimum wage for women and minors. This court case made people question why states should intervene between employers and employees when it comes to wages. This was mainly because the argument threatened cheap and free labor, especially that of women. This continued to push the acknowledgement of how women's wages were measured. Men's wages were determined considering the families they had at home, while women's wages were determined only considering the woman herself and the assumption that she is receiving support from someone else. These assumptions continued to push the narrative that women did not need to be paid as much as men. Women's wages now have improved from when they first entered the workforce, although they are still lower compared to that of men. Both men and women doing the same work do not get paid the same amount. Gender roles and stereotypes are still embedded in the institutions we have today. Even when it comes to having the same task, men and women who have the same job positions will likely be asked to perform different tasks. The man will be seen as more competent or capable of performing a task even if his qualifications are the same as his female colleague. The woman might also be asked to do other things outside of her job description, like get coffee for everyone or organize a company event. I know some women in my life that have been asked to do such tasks simply because they are a woman. Unfortunately, we have not fully escaped the gender expectations in wages, both when it comes to wages and other duties. This week's module showed us a glimpse of what this looked like for women when they first entered the workforce, and we can use these readings to compare them to our own experiences now. Thank you.